So I guess we'll now move on to the NFC North
Yes.
and the Chicago Bears.
This is going to be a hefty, a lengthy um, one track power hour. Should we keep, or are we going to keep it in one?
We can split it later or whatever too, so we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In the NFC North, okay. You want to go through the Bears quarterbacks?
sure. We've got presumed starter Justin Fields, as long as he's healthy. PJ Walker, uh, old friend Nathan Peterman, and third on the depth chart right now, and Tyson Agent fourth.
Yeah. Um, Fields, of course, is the starter. The Bears had the number one overall pick last year, but they opted not to draft another quarterback and instead traded back with the Panthers, who ended up taking Bryce Young. So the Bears must be comfortable with Justin Fields. He was the 11th overall pick in 2021 out of Ohio State. He was kind of a high school rival of Trevor Lawrence. He had also been also from Georgia, like Lawrence. He started at the University of Georgia, but then transferred away because he was stuck behind Jake Fromm, just like Stetson Bennett was stuck behind Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm is now also he's on the Commanders roster. We'll talk about Fromm, but Fields has started now 2 years primarily for the Bears. He's been hurt a couple of times. He's 5-20 as a starter, so not very good record. 24 passing touchdowns, 21 interceptions, but he did rush for 1,143 yards last year. He only passed for 2,200 yards ish last year, so in 15 games, so not so many yards. But he's perhaps one of the great running quarterbacks, maybe the best running quarterback in the league. But he needs to improve his passing in the NFL to probably NFL quarterback in general. But
Which has shown like flashes of being a very exciting player, at least anyway.
Right? Yeah. You mentioned PJ Walker as the second one. He's probably battling for number two behind with Nathan Peterman. Walker is 28, former undrafted free agent from Temple. He helped Temple to success under Matt Rule, who became from the Temple head coach, who was Temple head coach, then became the Baylor head coach, then became the Panthers head coach, where Walker got most of his NFL experience. And now Rule, of course, is now the Nebraska head coach after kind of crashing out of Carolina. But Walker was on the practice squad for Indianapolis until 2019. He then was with the Houston Roughnecks in the XFL, and then has been Carolina backup for the last 3 seasons, mostly under Rule. 7 career NFL starts, 4-3 record, 63.9 passer rating, so not so great. 5 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, not so great. 5 games started for Carolina last year, so he at least has some experience. And you might think his NFL experience has not been so good, but it actually is much better than his competitor, Nathan Peterman's experience. Peterman is 29. He also came out in the 2017 class. He was drafted in the 5th round from Pitt. He had started at Tennessee. He's about 6'3". He's a 33 Wonderlic, so maybe that's one reason why he's stuck around. He has 5 NFL starts, but only a 39.4 passer rating. Famously, he had some really bad games with Buffalo early in his career. 4 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He's been with Buffalo. He's been with the Raiders from 2019 to 2021. John Gruden famously liked Nathan Peterman, but I don't think he ever started a game with the Raiders. And then this is his 2nd season with the Bears. And then we have Tyson Bagent, Bagent, undrafted free agent from Shepherd University, a Division II school in West Virginia. He won the Harlan Hill Trophy in 2021, which is kind of like the D2 Heisman. 159 touchdowns in college, 40 interceptions. Most touchdown passes in NCAA history in any division, apparently.
Wow.
He's 6'3", but he's only a pocket passer. So unlike Fields, basically the other 3 quarterbacks are kind of more statuesque. And so
which is a little strange for switching style of play from quarterback to quarterback, but sometimes that's an advantage though too, right?
Yeah, you could say
If you
that.
have to change up, then it's, but your team has to be able to accommodate that switch, right?
Yeah, but after Fields, we don't have a lot of great options in Chicago.
But from the preseason game, all four quarterbacks did play. But listen to Justin Fields' line for the game, okay? 3 of 3, 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a 62-yard touchdown pass and a 56-yard touchdown pass. And he played 2 possessions.
I believe
129 yards.
all of those passes were behind the line of scrimmage, though.
They were all described as short pass, and then they went for a very long ways. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so he had a wonderful statistical day, and he got the ball out and he put it in the right spot. Then he let the receivers do the work. But well, maybe the Bears offense is just schemed so well now that will happen.
Yeah.
Anymore.
That's quite a line, though. 3 of 3, 129 yards and 2.
That's
No,
funny.
I mean, that one pass that did not go for a touchdown was a complete failure in comparison, then, right?
Yeah.
Only went for like 11 yards, so garbage. Yeah. Yeah, maybe now on to Detroit. We've got number 1 starter Jared Goff as the highest paid player in the NFC. I assume is going to be Detroit's number 1 starter, right? $31 million salary for the season.
Barring injury, yeah.
They also have looks like Teddy Bridgewater has been like relatively recently picked up. Is the number 2 guy on the depth chart at 2.6 million for his salary for this season. Nate Sudfeld, Adrian Martinez, and Hendon Hooker round out the quarterback room for Detroit.
Yeah, Goff is their former number 1 overall pick by the Rams in 2016. He went to Cal. He actually went to a Super Bowl for the Rams, lost in 2018 to the Patriots in that awful 10-3 Super Bowl. You remember that one? He was traded with several draft picks to Detroit for Matt Stafford. I think perhaps both teams are happy with that trade at this point. Stafford won a Super Bowl with the Rams, and I think the Lions are in a solid position to maybe contend the next couple of years. Goff is a pretty he had 36 on the Win Rate, so he did pretty well on that test. So maybe a smart guy. Solid NFL quarterback, maybe not spectacular, but solid. 155 touchdowns career, 70 interceptions. This is going to be his 3rd season with Detroit. Last year, he threw for 4,400 plus yards, 29 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions, 99.3 quarterback rating. So passer rating. So really good. He's 54-45-1 as a starter, plus a 2-3 playoff record. He's 6'4". He looks like a quarterback. He's a pretty decent quarterback. In the NFC, he actually is a well above average quarterback, where he might be somewhere in the middle overall in the NFL. But he's going to be the starter. Probably, it seems like right now, Teddy Bridgewater is going to be the number 1 backup. He was just signed a week or 2 ago.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the big names left out. He's only 30 still, Bridgewater. It seems he's been around for a very long time, but he's only 30. Only a year older than Goff, who's going to be 29 next month. He was a 2014 overall first. He was 2014 first round pick by the Vikings out of Louisville. He was a 32nd overall pick, so the last pick in the first round, much like Lamar Jackson from Louisville as well, was the last pick in the first round. He played for the Vikings for his first 4 seasons. He got injured after the 2015 season and barely played for the Vikings after that. And that kind of led to the Kirk Cousins signing that the Vikings had. So we'll talk about him in a little bit. But he played for the Vikings through 2017, Jets practice squad with New Orleans a couple of years in 18 to 19. He spent 2020 with Carolina, 2021 with Denver, 2022 with Miami. So he's been around a lot. he's developed to a really good backup, decent spot starter, kind of a fringe starting quarterback, probably in the NFL. A 33-32 record as a starter. He's not mobile, maybe like he once was before his knee injury, but 75 touchdowns, 47 interceptions, a 90.5 career quarterback rating, which is pretty good, especially for a backup passer. So he's a solid backup. It seems like Detroit is probably going somewhat all in on this season. Like they're thinking like, well, if Goff gets hurt, we want someone who can still be a pretty good quarterback. And I think they have it with Bridgewater. Especially at least having Bridgewater until there maybe depending what they want to do with Goff, maybe their long-term quarterback prospect, however, is Hendon Hooker, who was a third-round draft pick this year from Tennessee. Some people thought he might even slip into the bottom of the first round. He's 25, so kind of old for a almost Stetson Bennett old for a first-year NFL player. He's also injured his knee in December, I believe. He was third round pick from Tennessee. He started at Virginia Tech, then he played for Tennessee the last 2 years. In his last 2 years at Tennessee, he threw 58 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions over 2 seasons. He rushed for over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns over those 2 seasons too. So, maybe he's not the mobile player he once was, depending on how his knee works, but he's currently on the reserve non-football injury list, so he's probably not going to be around most of this season. And he was probably just drafted as a developmental player. And also maybe if Goff becomes too expensive or if he gets hurt, maybe we'll have Hooker. Bridgewater's a stopgap in between. But we also have 2 other quarterbacks on the roster. Nate Sudfeld, who will be 30 years old as well in October. Former 2016 6th-round pick by Washington. He never played with Washington, but he ended up going to the Eagles for 4 seasons as a backup from 2017 to 2020. And he went to Indiana as in college. He probably most famously would play in 2021. Well, he didn't play at all in 2021 with San Francisco, but I think he was seen as a potential future developmental quarterback in San Francisco in 2021. San Francisco famously goes through quarterbacks very quickly. They all get injured there, but I think with Purdy getting picked, Sudfeld became expendable. He went to Detroit last year. He's never started a game in his career 188 yards passing. I would say probably Bridgewater was brought in because they wanted a more experienced backup than Sudfeld, who maybe could be fine, but we don't know. He's 6'6", so he's a big, tall guy, which is why probably he's stuck around in the league for so long. And then 5th quarterback is Adrian Martinez, kind of a plucky but injury-prone, hard luck case in college. He played for Nebraska for 4 seasons, and then played for K-State last year. Undrafted free agent, good runner. Sometimes gets hurt. He's probably competing with Sudfeld for number 3 at the best case, but maybe probably a practice squad guy. Any comments on Detroit's quarterback?
So in the first preseason game, Sudfeld handled most of the duties, like 3/4 of the game, it looks like. And then Adrian Martinez finished that first game, at least anyway. So only 2 of the 5 quarterbacks appeared in that preseason game. But, like you mentioned, Hendon Hooker is injured and not expected to play, I think, at all this season, right?
Yeah, I don't think so either. Even if he gets on the roster, he's probably not going to play because they have Goff and Bridgewater, and it's probably just best to let Hooker rest. It seems like
they've actually tagged him as the injured list. In non-football injury is what they have him down as.
Well, it was a non-Detroit Lions football injury, but it was a football injury.
So it happened before he was an NFL player, so it must be, yes, non-pro football injury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like the Lions are at least prepared if somebody goes down, their starter, or if Goff somehow maybe has a bad few weeks or something like that, we can put Bridgewater in. But their divisional counterparts, the Green Bay Packers, seem to have left no room for error in their quarterback room, even though there seems like there is going to be perhaps a lot of error happening. What do you think of? So what's going on in Green Bay? Who do we have in there?
Yeah, only three quarterbacks. They didn't bring a fourth or fifth quarterback in like Detroit has. I mean, they are going all in on Jordan Love, presumably. They've also brought out Alex McGough, McGuff.
Magoo, as I believe how they say it. It looks like McGuff, perhaps, but it's
Yes,
McGoff, but it's
McGuff.
Magoo.
Yeah. McGough, yeah, and Sean Clifford as their third, maybe second quarterbacks actually.
Yeah, so their two backups are both cartoon characters. We have Mr. Magoo and we have
Yes, Clifford Big Red Dog.
Big Red Dog. But and maybe it's about as comical as that, because I don't, the Packers starting quarterback is Jordan Love, 24 years old now, first round pick from Utah State in 2020. He's been on the bench for 3 years behind Aaron Rodgers. Supposedly he was kind of Mahomes like, but he didn't have that much college success. His best season was his junior year. He kind of tailed off his senior year. Not much NFL success or experience. He only has one game started. That was against Kansas City in 2021 when Rodgers had COVID, when he famously said that he had been immunized instead of vaccinated, and
Yes,
was not immunized or vaccinated.
right.
But he's 6'4", big guy, but he has 606 career NFL passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And that by far is the most experience in the NFL of any of the quarterbacks on the Green Bay Packers roster right now. The backup, or possibly third, the two quarterbacks battling for the backup position, at least at this point, are Alex McGough. He's 27, former 7th round pick from by Seattle in 2018. He went to Florida International University. He was picked up by Seattle. He went to Jacksonville. He went to Houston. He went to Seattle again, and then the USFL Birmingham Stallions, where he won the league championship in the USFL. But he was not the starting quarterback most of that year. He was actually filled in the championship game. So that maybe was as compared to possibly what Philip Rivers might have achieved in the NFL. But no career NFL appearances. He is the nephew of former Chiefs punter Kelly Goodburn, who was the punter in the late 80s. I don't know, but that's Alex McGough. No career NFL appearances and he has as many NFL starts and games as Sean Clifford, the new draft pick, 5th round draft pick from Penn State, who is 25 now. So again, he's an older guy too. If you followed Penn State football last year, which I sort of did, being at Penn State, most of the fans thought that freshman Drew Aller was a better player than Clifford by midseason, and they wanted Clifford benched for Drew Aller. Aller is possibly a Heisman Trophy dark horse and was a 5-star recruit and was seen as a potential pro prospect. Clifford had a solid college record because Penn State's usually a good team, but he wasn't able to win really important games like against Ohio State or Michigan. So he was seen as kind of a failure, even though he was a long-term dependable starter for the Nittany Lions. He did do well in the Rose Bowl against Utah this past season. He had 2,800 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions last year in 13 starts. 86 touchdowns in college to 31 interceptions overall. So it was a solid quarterback. But Green Bay's really risking it, I think, at quarterback this year. There's no backup plan really if Love struggles. Are you going to put Magoo in or Clifford in? This is where somebody you would think like maybe this is where Carson Wentz would be, or somebody who was maybe a last minute cut by one of the other teams needs to be brought in here, because if Love struggles, the Packers are just out of it. It seems like, I don't know what there's no upside, I don't think, really, to either of these backup quarterbacks. I think you can say maybe there is upside to Love, but but there's still a lot of
They
potential.
could actually finish fourth in the division, right? I mean, that's not outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I think it's possibly likely. Yeah, especially with Detroit on the rise, Minnesota already a solid team.
Mm,
The Bears aren't going to be as bad probably as they were last year,
you wouldn't think so.
and the Packers maybe are sinking.
They did
Should
play all three quarterbacks in their preseason game, which they won quite handily against Cincinnati. But
Well, what do we know? Maybe they're going to blow everybody else out, and
yeah,
Love's going to be.
looks like Clifford took the bulk of the playing time. He was 20 of 26, 208 yards, a touchdown, but also threw 2 interceptions. So yeah, but they did score 36 points in the game, and it was, points in every quarter. And it looks like a pretty good game. But also they would have used their starters at least more than Cincinnati did, because it doesn't look like Cincinnati used their starters at all.
Yeah, Love had a decent start. It looks like he was
7 of 10, 46 yards and a touchdown.
Looks like Magoo only got one passing situation and he got sacked. No attempts, no completions, but he was sacked one time. So
Yeah, it shows 3 carries for -3 yards. So I don't know if he just did kneel downs or
I guess so, but he got sacked for
no yards though. So I don't know.
I guess those were probably kneel downs at the end, but did he get sacked in his only drop back?
He was sacked, a 3-yard sack for his last play. Oh, and he fumbled, which was recovered by Cincinnati.
Ooh, poor Magoo.
But Cincinnati was able to do anything with it, and then 3 kneel downs to end the game. Yeah.
Well, maybe Clifford then is on his way to being the number 2 player, and Magoo is going to be the 3rd quarterback.
Yeah, that's what it's looking like, at least from indication from the first preseason game, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? But yeah, that's what it looks like right now. Yeah, as a squad, Green Bay, by far the lowest paid quarterback room of the division. Then yeah, far cry, the 6.1 combined $1 million compared to Detroit's 37 million. But also falls along with the expectation for the team though too, right? So
yeah, I think it's if you spend I think the more that's invested in quarterback play, I think the better your team is going to be.
yeah.
Sometimes I guess that doesn't always correlate, because good quarterbacks are usually more expensive, but young good quarterbacks are cheap for a little while and then they really skyrocket.
Yeah.
But you have to be good though to actually make that worth anything. Just having a young cheap quarterback is not necessarily a benefit in and of itself. The Minnesota Vikings, should we move on to them, the 4th team in the division alphabetically, but the first place team last year, and probably picked to repeat, maybe be challenged by Detroit this year. They have the most experienced quarterback in the division, along with Goff, probably the one who could claim maybe to be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFC, and that's Kirk Cousins at age 34 now. 4th round pick in 2012 by Washington. That was the same year, famously, that RG3 was picked number 2 overall, and RG3 got hurt eventually, maybe used poorly as a young player, injured his knees, and then Cousins became the starter as time went on in Washington. He's 6'3", 33 on the Wonderlic. He replaced RG3, but then he's rather than staying in Washington like I think the fans wanted him to do, he ended up signing a big contract in Minnesota, where he was, at least for a little while, the league's highest paid quarterback, I believe.
No, he's 4th in the NFC.
4th in the NFC.
20.2 million this season.
Okay, he was making 30-something million. I think he took a pay cut recently.
Maybe.
But he's a solid quarterback, but famously he usually does best in the early slot on Sunday afternoon. whether it's noon Central Time or 1 Eastern. That's where he does his best work. In prime time, he usually struggles. In the playoffs, he hasn't been so great either. Last year, the Vikings, of course, lost a home playoff game to the Giants that they had been favored to win. He's overall, though, 72, 63, and 2 as a starter. Last year, he had 29 touchdowns, 14 picks, and over 4,500 yards passing. Career passer rating of almost 100, 97.8. So he perhaps is one of the but the Vikings are one of those. They remind me a little bit of the Chiefs, like pre-Mahomes. When they were always a good team, never really threatening to win the conference, but also they were going to be solid. And they have Alex Smith or Dave Craig or Trent Green. They have a decent quarterback, but not a great quarterback, and they'll be maybe a solid playoff team. The Vikings backup, it seems like this year will probably be Nick Mullins. We mentioned Mullins briefly. He's 28 now. He was an undrafted free agent out of Southern Mississippi in 2017. He shattered most of Brett Favre's passer records there. He was a 49er for early part of his career. He's 5-12 in his career as a starter. All but one of those games he started with the 49ers, mostly in 2018 and 2020 when Garoppolo was hurt. He was with Cleveland in 2021. He was with Minnesota last year. 27 career touchdowns, 23 interceptions. He's a decent backup quarterback who could win games if called upon to do so. So, solid backup, which, I think a team like Green Bay would like to have, but I don't know why they don't. But the Vikings at least are, they have Cousins, who's a veteran, Mullins, who's sort of a younger veteran, and they have a rookie in Jaron Hall, 5th-round draft pick out of BYU. He's also 25, so a lot of older older draft picks. He is older than Jordan Love, for example, as is Sean Clifford. He's also older than Justin Fields. But being at BYU, of course, usually most of them have Mormon missions that last 2 years, so they're usually about 2 years older than most guys coming out. But he followed Zach Wilson as the starter. 31 touchdowns, 6 interceptions last year for the BYU Cougars, now in the Big 12. He's kind of a little guy, only about 6 feet tall, 3,100 yards passing. Seems pretty mobile, but probably backup quarterback is probably his ceiling, I would guess. But at least a developmental player. Any comments on the Vikings situation?
No, I didn't look to see what they did in the preseason game, who they used and how much. Looks like Mullins got the bulk of the play, and Jaron Hall had some as well. Yeah, Mullins 14-20, 139 yards and a touchdown, no interceptions, was not sacked. That's not so bad.
Yeah, I think Mullins, it seemed like he was able to win games, at least for the 49ers, when he was not really expected to. CJ Beathard at that point was the backup to Garoppolo, was thought to be a better out of Iowa. So, of course, you're not a fan of Beathard. Iowa State, Brock Purdy, of course, has done much better in San Francisco than Beathard ever did. So, but Mullins was okay. And he
proof that Iowa State is better than Iowa, right?
Yeah. Do you think Nick Mullins, being a Southern Miss graduate, gave any money to the women's volleyball center that was constructed by Brett Favre?
Yeah,
totally legitimately.
Probably.
Or whatever it was. Wasn't it a women's volleyball center or something?
Yeah, I think that's what the aim was for. Yeah, was to. Yes. What was it? They're pulling money from
Hurricane.
It was earmarked for some like a low income
areas and temporary assistance for needy families program.
Well,
child care assistance, job preparation, work assistance. Yeah.
No. Who knows?
The women's volleyball center.
Yeah.
But he was also wanted money for a new football facility to help recruit Deion Sanders' son, luring him. Sanders. I don't know what happened with Shadur, Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur. He's on Colorado, I guess, right now. That makes sense because his dad is the coach of Colorado.
Yeah.
He played at
I
Jackson State.
haven't really thought about that. Yeah, that means Deion Sanders is going to be in the Big 12
Yeah.
next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I hadn't even really thought that part of it though. That's kind of funny.
Shedeur Sanders was actually very good for Jackson State.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has a record of 21-3 as a starter. 70 touchdowns, 14 interceptions over those 24 games. 7,000 yards passing. So he's passed for about 3,500 yards and 35 touchdowns on average in the season. So he might be a draft pick next year, since this will be his third season. Yeah, interesting. But that's not neither here nor there for the Minnesota Vikings. But we have different approaches, I guess, and one of them, when we the ones that we think are probably solid, are the Bears, the Lions, and the Vikings. At least those make sense to us, where the Packers don't. But maybe they've got something planned. Maybe they think, well, we'll just get the best quarterback that gets dropped, gets cut, or we'll bring in Carson Wentz late if it seems like things are bad. I don't know. It seems like the Packers are under prepared. Like they've had all this time to think about what they're going to do.
Yeah.
When Rodgers leaves, but now what do we have? We have Jordan Love, Alex McGough, and Sean Clifford. It's not like Rodgers retired suddenly, like Andrew did when
mid contracts.
We'll talk about Jacoby Brissett, kind of having to step in for luck a couple of times. But
yeah,
it's strange what they're doing there in Green Bay. Maybe it's also because they don't have an owner. They just don't have they don't have somebody, telling
a person that makes decisions. It's like it's a committee, right? That has to go through a lot of procedures to make something happen. Is that how it works there? Yeah. Well, should we shift over to the NFC East?
NFC East, yeah, the East
final
was
NFC conference,
most competitive of the divisions last year. And so
probably not so competitive in the quarterback positional competitions within the some of the teams, at least anyway. Pretty well defined as to who's going to be the starter, I think, for most of it. For 3 of the 4 teams, at least, anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. Kick off with Dallas here. Dak Prescott, obviously the number 1 starter there. Cooper Rush, who had filled in quite well, I think, for Dak last year, seems to be obviously the number 2, right? And then Will Greer, 3rd on the list, I suppose, right?
Yeah. So we have 3 solid quarterbacks. Are all about the same age. Dak Prescott's 30, Cooper Rush is 29, Will Greer is 28. Prescott is 30 years old, one of the elder statesmen now in the NFL for quarterbacks, especially in the NFC. 4th round pick from Mississippi State in 2016. He was the NFC Offensive Rookie of the Year that year. He's been starting since his rookie year because Tony Romo was injured most of that year, and then he retired shortly after. So it's been basically the Prescott show since he's been there, which I don't think people expected when he was drafted. I think they thought, well, maybe they can develop for a couple of years under Romo, but Romo retired more quickly than they thought. And actually, I think Prescott was probably better than what they thought. He's 61-36 as a starter, so a decent record. 2-4 playoff record, not great, but not that bad for Dallas, given their playoff lack of success in this century. He's mobile, though he runs less in recent years. 166 career touchdowns, only 65 interceptions. but he only started 12 games last year. He's missed significant time 2 out of the last 3 seasons. That could be, is that coincidence? Is that a trend? Last year, even though he didn't play particularly well in the regular season, he had 15 interceptions in only 12 games. He had 23 touchdowns. He had hurt his thumb on opening day, which kind of maybe affected him, but he could maybe be one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the conference as well. But last year, I think some people thought Cooper Rush might be at least maybe a Taylor Heineke story, like maybe not as good in the stats as Prescott, but maybe if somebody that the team could rally around a little bit better than Prescott, who's maybe aloof a little bit or not. I don't know. Maybe he's not the. I don't. He's not a popular guy the way some quarterbacks are by his team. I think he's not quite Russell Wilson. I don't think on one end, but I don't think he's beloved really by fans or players. Partly because he's good, but he's not good enough to be like a really, really top guy. But I don't think anybody should have ever expected him to be that. But he's the Cowboys quarterback. He's kind of thought he has to be. But Cooper Rush is 29, undrafted free agent from Central Michigan, the Chippewas. He was with the Cowboys his entire career, other than a very short stint in 2020 on the Giants practice squad. He started 5 games last year, 6 games overall, about 1,500 yards passing in his career, 8 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He has a 5-1 record though as a starter, so some like him better than Dak, but even though he's not as good, but Dak's just not the elite player. So the backup quarterback is sometimes the most popular guy in town, and that's what Cooper Rush is. He's a solid backup, probably not even a fringe starter, maybe a fringe starter, but backup quarterback. And I think that's kind of what the third quarterback is, Will Greer. He's 28, 3rd round pick from West Virginia. He began his career at Florida, like a couple other quarterbacks that we've mentioned. He was 3rd round pick by Carolina in 2019. His first 2 years with Carolina, with Dallas, the last since 2021. This will be his 3rd season. He started 2 games as a rookie, no touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He hasn't played an NFL snap since 2019, however, but he was a solid college quarterback. Maybe he has more upside than Rush. He was at least more highly touted, but he's 28 now, so you're a little bit long in the tooth for a developmental person. But I think maybe Greer could be okay, or Rush has proven himself to be an okay backup, and Prescott's a solid starter. So I think Dallas is pretty okay at the quarterback position, because Rush has proven that he can at least step in for a little while if Prescott goes down.
You probably wouldn't want to start the season with him being your primary quarterback, but they're not. So that's fine. Yeah.
And Prescott makes a lot of money, which maybe also troubles the Cowboys and kind of hamstrings them, maybe a little bit like Kyler Murray does. You're stuck with this guy who has a lot of money. Is there a market for him if you wanted to trade him and get somebody really good? Hard to say.
Yeah, and he is the 2nd highest paid quarterback in the NFC, $26.8 million for this season. Looks like Cooper Rush is going to make about $2.1 million as the backup. And it looks like Greer actually handled most of the snaps in the preseason game. He was 22 of 31 for 199 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. Cooper Rush, though, was 10 of 12 for 83 yards. I guess he was most likely the starter. I assume he was the starter for the game.
Yeah. Interesting that a lot of these teams, like unlike the Chiefs who started Mahomes, a lot of these teams are not even playing their starter yet.
Or they play like one series, or they played against Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence did have one series.
Okay, so I guess different teams have different strategies.
Yeah, some teams do nothing, no starters. It's just all trying to figure out 2, 3, 4, order of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. But 10 or 12, 83 yards, that's a pretty good line for a series or 2.
That's right.
But they're not concerned about this. I don't think they're not really looking to determine who's which position, because they already know. So that's not much evaluation to do here for Dallas, I think. Probably not much evaluation for the New York Giants either.
Yeah, I think the Giants maybe are in the same boat as the Cowboys. They have an expensive quarterback who's pretty good, but probably not elite, and somebody that could lead them to a championship. Although in the NFC, you don't necessarily need that. So this is Daniel Jones. He's 26. First round draft pick in 2019 from Duke. He was a 3-year starter in college, but had pretty pedestrian stats. In But he looks like a quarterback. He's big, he's mobile. He has done much better under the new coach Brian Dable, but his stats still aren't that great. He had 3,200 yards passing last year, which in 1995 was a pretty good season for a quarterback, but in 2022 is below average in terms of passing yards. Only 15 touchdown passes, but only 5 interceptions. He did run for 708 yards as well. So he's maybe a Josh Allen light is his ceiling, it seems like. But he signed this huge, possibly crippling contract for the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
It's not terribly long, at least for the Giants. Do you have the details of his contract?
Well, this season he's going to be making 21.8 million, and Tyrod Taylor as the backup is making a pretty hefty sum, 6.9 million for a backup is a bit pricey, at least anyway.
Yeah, Taylor's a good backup. He's kind of a fringe starter. He's 34 now. He's older. 6th round draft pick from Virginia Tech by the Ravens in 2011. He's played for the Ravens, the Bills, the Browns, the Chargers, the Texans, and now he's in his 2nd season with the Giants. He used to be a kind of a running quarterback, but it's been more of a pocket passer later in his career. 26, 25, and 1 record as a starter. His most success was probably with Buffalo when from 2015 to 2017 when he had 60 touchdowns to 26 interceptions. He's a great backup though, but I'd say he also was perhaps penciled in as the starter for a little while for the Chargers, but then he famously had that chest injury where he was injected with some sort of shot, but it went too far and went into his lungs or his heart, and he couldn't play.
It collapsed the lung, yeah.
And Justin Herbert got his start earlier than was expected, and Herbert never relinquished that role. So
yeah.
Tyrod Taylor was kind of Wally pipped out of the Chargers starting position, but he's been pretty good as a backup in a solid starter as well. So the Giants as well have a good backup plan, at least for a few games if Jones gets hurt. The third quarterback is less tested than anyone than the Cowboys, though, for sure, and that's Tommy DeVito, who is an undrafted free agent in 2023. He's also 25 years old. So a lot of these older quarterbacks. He started at Syracuse, and then he had a graduate transfer to Illinois last year. He's a Jersey guy that you probably could guess by the last name DeVito. He's much taller than his possible Uncle Danny. He is 6'2". Danny DeVito, I think, is
they are not related.
No
related. I was typing in, are they related?
Hey, Tommy.
As you were just beginning the intro on him, and it says, no, they are not related. No.
Yeah, so Tommy DeVito had started back for Syracuse back in 2019. Then he got hurt and then kind of never recovered his job. But in Illinois, he had a solid. He threw for 2,600 yards, 15 touchdowns, only 4 picks. Leads the Illinois Fighting Illini to a 8-5 record last year, so better than they've been in a long time. But he's probably kind of a fringe backup. So I would say even probably on your 3rd string quarterback, you might be looking for somebody better than Tommy DeVito. But he'd be competing for the number 2 role on the Green Bay Packers at this point. So the Giants are in a much better position than the Packers are. But you might think the Giants might want a more experienced, or at least maybe a higher upside guy than Tommy DeVito at number 3. But for now, I think he's probably a practice squad candidate.
And yeah, you weren't kidding about Daniel Jones' contract becoming potentially crippling, though. Yeah, because his cap hit this season, 21.8 million this season, 45 next year. There is a potential out before the 2025 season, but if not, if they continue to, keep him on the roster. 39.5 for 2025 and 56.5 for 2026.
Yeah, he's gonna be pricey.
Yeah.
So maybe he'll have a leap like Josh Allen made. But maybe he'll just be a adequate quarterback as well. I think the Giants are probably, I think they overachieved last year. They're probably due for a regression to the mean, but who knows? They have a lot of high hopes in New York. They probably also have high hopes in Philadelphia to replicate and perhaps improve upon even their season last year, where they made the Super Bowl but lost a close, hard-fought matchup to Kansas City Chiefs. Who do we have in Philadelphia as their quarterbacks?
So they've got a pretty solid lineup in the quarterback room anyway. Jalen Hurts, pretty good season last year, maybe his one outlier season from what we've seen from him so far. Marcus Mariota is now there as a backup. Also there, Ian Book and Tanner McKee.
Yeah, so we have 4 quarterbacks. Hurts is the starter, of course. He's 25 now. Second round pick from Oklahoma in I think 2021. This is gonna be his third year in Alabama. I mean, third year in Philadelphia. He started his career at Alabama, where he was supplanted by Tua Tagovailoa, famously. But his great season it was 2020 he was drafted. Great season at OU in 2019, made him an NFL prospect. Became a second round pick, solid runner, decent passer. Breakout pro season last year where he led the Eagles to the Super Bowl and this huge contract that he signed, $50 million a year. But is he another Carson Wentz? That was the last time the Eagles had a kind of breakout young quarterback who led the team to playoff success, but then Wentz kind of crumbled. But last year, Hurts had 3,700 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 101.5 passer rating, plus 706. Grew much better maybe than people thought he would, but he did get hurt towards the end of the year. But he had a pretty good playoff run coming back from injury. He played well in the Super Bowl against Mahomes. Other than that kind of bad fumble that Bolton returned, which may have actually cost the Eagles the game, he was a solid player in the playoffs, great player of the regular season. Is he kind of de facto maybe the NFC's best quarterback with Brady retiring and Rodgers moving on? Maybe, I don't know, but it's one season though, so it's hard to say. They've only his backup
is very solid, right? So they don't really need the quarterback to be doing everything for them too. So
last year they had Gardner Minshew as the backup, and I think this year they're probably a little better as a backup with Marcus Mariota. Although Minshew was pretty good too, but I think Mariota has been a decent starter. He's been a starter that's led the team to the playoffs in this league. He's 29. He'll be 30 in late October. He won the Heisman Trophy in Oregon in 2014, number 2 overall pick in 2015 by Tennessee. Great college player, good passer, mobile, but he's been fairly kind of injury prone, fragile by NFL standards. So he's kind of a big guy. He's bigger than I thought he was. He's 6'4". He started most of his time in Tennessee when he was drafted by the Titans from 15 to 19. Then he was back up for 2 years in Oakland, where he didn't really see much action. And then he started early on for the Falcons last year. He was 5-8 for the Falcons, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 2,200 yards passing, plus 400 plus rushing yards or rushing touchdowns. So he's kind of a similar player to Hurts in a lot of ways. 34-40 in his career as a starter. He's Hawaiian, which would a little bit like Tua, Polynesian descent. So, but he's a very good backup, I would say. Probably somebody who could be starting in the league at some team, like in the NFC South. I think he should be starting. I don't think Ritter should have probably been put in for him, but maybe I don't know. But Mariota is a good backup. I think Ian Book, who's 25 years old, fourth round pick from New Orleans in 2021 out of Notre Dame, is a very good third quarterback. He's got some upside. He's similar in a lot of ways to Mariota and Hurts because he is mobile and is a good passer. 3-year starter at Notre Dame, led Notre Dame to the college football playoffs in 2020. A little bit smaller than either Mariota or Hurts, but 9,000 yards passing in college, plus 1,500 rushing yards and 17 touchdowns. Didn't turn the ball over very much in college, only 20 interceptions to 72 touchdowns. He was drafted by the Saints. He played one game for the Saints in 2021, didn't do very well. 12 of 20, 135 yards, 2 interceptions, quarterback rating of 40.6. He kind of immediately went to the Eagles practice squad last year. So he's been on the Eagles 2 years, but didn't play much at all. Hasn't played since that bad game in his rookie season, which isn't surprising that you would have a bad game as a fourth round rookie. But the fourth quarterback is Tanner McKee, 23 years old, 6th round pick from Stanford. He had a terrible record as a collegiate starter. He went 6-16 for the Cardinal. He has no mobility whatsoever. He has only thrown 28 career touchdown passes, but he's thrown 25 interceptions. But he's 6'6", so he's big. He looks like a quarterback, which is probably why he was drafted. Seems like Book was the superior player at a similar level. He played at Notre Dame versus Stanford. But I guess you need another guy. But it seems odd that they drafted him rather than just like picking somebody up as an undrafted free agent. Why not just draft a different position player rather than Tanner McKee? But maybe he's got something that we don't see that hasn't been revealed yet. But he has not had much success in college, so it seems like it's hard to do well in the NFL if you don't have success in college. Because
it's much harder to evaluate the player, right? As being a potential NFL player if he hasn't seen much success in college.
Yeah, it's a little bit puzzling. Maybe I guess he probably has good mechanics and does well in workouts and things like that. But yeah, he was. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. He has 15 interceptions, not 25 interceptions as a starter. So 28 and 15, but he only threw 13 touchdowns last year as a starter in 12 games. He threw 15 the year before, so he had a better year in 2021 than he did in 2022. But he's 6'6". He's tall, and I guess that's why. But so his interceptions are not as high than I guess. So sorry, apologies to Tanner McKee. I had a typo there, but still, he doesn't have a lot of college production, despite being a two-time two-year college starter. So, but that's the Eagles.
It looks like he handled the bulk of the playing time in their first preseason game. He was 10 of 20 for 148 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions.
And that kind of jives with what he did in college. Not that great.
It's fine, but they're also not asking him to be the primary starter.
McKee has a total of negative 86 yards rushing in his college career as well.
A lot of kneel downs, probably.
I guess 80, kneel downs.
80 kneel downs, no other rushing attempts. Is that what you're guessing?
Apparently. He had 6 rushing touchdowns over the course of. He had an interesting rushing total in his junior year. He had 61 attempts for 4 yards positive for a 0.1 average. But last year he had 74 attempts minus 90 yards for minus 1.2 average. So he's averaging negative 0.6 yards per rush
for his career.
So he is very, like you had said, though, you kind of think a different style is sometimes good for backups. He has a very different style from any of the other 3 quarterbacks, I guess. But Philadelphia has, backup covered, and they have possible, taking flyers on potential third quarterbacks that could develop. So they're doing fine. But I guess the one quibble is, why would you waste a draft pick on somebody that you could have gotten just as good, even if you couldn't have gotten that guy particularly from the undrafted free agent scrap heap.
Yeah. How about our final team of the NFC? Should they have tried to find somebody off of the scrap heap to take a fourth QB role? Washington Commanders.
Possibly, but even though they don't have, they're doing at least what Atlanta is doing in the NFC South, rather than doing what Green Bay is doing in the North.
Really similar anyway, but they're paying their backup a lot more than Atlanta is paying their backup, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Heineke is not making as much as Brissett is, I guess.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, but they have similar kind of. So
Yeah.
Commanders have Sam Howell as their starter, probably Jacoby Brissett as the backup, and Jake Fromm as their third quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have what was the contract?
Yeah, so Howell's making less than $1 million for this season, as is Fromm. But Brissett's making $8.5 million, so he's the 9th highest paid NFC quarterback, and is the highest paid backup, well, presumed backup of any team in the NFC.
Yeah, well, so it seemed odd maybe to some that the Commanders didn't go after a quarterback in the draft, but they thought that Sam Howell, who started one game last year, he's 22, so younger than a lot of these first year quarterbacks, the way they've been coming out. 22, fifth round pick from North Carolina last year, 3-year college starter. He threw for over 3,000 yards and ran for over 800 yards in 2021, his last season in college. 92 career touchdowns in college to 23 interceptions. So solid college career. Started his final game of the 2022 NFL season against the Cowboys, and Washington won that game. That was when Washington was out of playoff contention because, in part, Ron Rivera forgot what the standings were a couple of games earlier when he started Carson Wentz instead of Heineke, thinking, oh, we don't need to win this game. We can win the next one and still make the playoffs. Well, that was not true. But Washington won that game. He went 11 for 19 for 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 rushing touchdown as well. Taylor Heineke-esque numbers, I guess you might say, but he's a younger Heineke. But it's still a big gamble going with him as a starter. Both Heineke and Wentz are gone from last year. Apparently Sam Howell also has never eaten beef or seafood. He only eats chicken as his only meat, apparently. He's a quarter Korean as well, which is I don't know, something I learned from his Wikipedia article, but never had beef.
That's difficult to do.
Yeah, I guess if you're Hindu or something like that, that would be I think. Yeah, it seems a little.
As an American,
or if you were a vegetarian completely, that would be maybe more normal. But if you eat chicken, and like most of the people like you might think is vegetarian, they would eat seafood over other things.
Yeah,
but like I don't really like seafood because I'm a landlubber. But it's interesting that anyway, I don't know. But he's only had chicken. I don't know. They didn't say anything about pork or any other meat, but. That's Sam Howell. I don't know. Where's the beef? You might ask.
He will have no idea. You won't know how to answer that question in any way.
Well, it's a reference that predates him, and
for reference and content, though, like it's just not a thing I'm aware of.
Yeah. Even Jacoby Brissett probably where's the beef reference. Predated because he's 30 years old. He will be 31 on December 11th, 1990. December 11th, which is my birthday. He was born December 11th, 1992, so he's exactly 14 years younger than I am. He was a 3rd round pick from NC State. He also started his career at Florida in 2016, drafted by the Patriots. He's almost 6'4". He was drafted by the Patriots kind of as the most recent of the potential Brady replacements of Jimmy Garoppolo, Matt Castle, all of those guys that were kind of brought in as possible heirs apparent. But Brady outlived them all. He went pretty much immediately after one season with the Patriots to the Colts, was there for 4 seasons, the Dolphins in 21, the Browns last year, where he started before Deshaun Watson returned from his suspension. Brissett has a career 18-30 record as a starter. solid backup, decent spot starter, 48 touchdowns to 23 career interceptions. So solid. He actually filled in twice for Andrew Luck as starter for the Colts. That's where most of his starts came from. Luck got hurt early or before the season started in 2017. He retired just before the 2019 season, leaving the Colts in a lurch both times. But he seems slated as the backup here, although I think he could fill in as a decent starter.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jake Fromm is the third quarterback. He's 25. 2020 fifth round pick out of Georgia by the Bills. He's younger than his former backup, Stetson Bennett, and he's been in the league for 4 years. He was waived by the Bills just before the 21 season, picked up by the Giants, but this is his second season with Washington. He was on the practice squad last year. Pocket passer. Only NFL action was in 2021 with the Giants. Started 2 games, 210 total passing yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, only a 38.9 passer rating. Do you know what Jake Fromm's nickname is?
I have no
Based
idea.
on a popular series of commercials, an organization that Patrick Mahomes is also involved with.
Is he Jake from State Farm?
He's Jake from State Farm. That's his
Jake
nickname.
Fromm.
Jake from State Farm.
I would think something like the Frominator, something like
Yeah, but he is apparently Jake from State Farm. So he wears,
Jake
I'm
Fromm.
sure he wears khaki pants on his off days when he's not wearing the white or gold or perhaps maroon of the Washington Commanders.
Yes.
The commies. Whether or not they'll have that nickname for much longer, it remains to be seen. But the Commanders have 3 quarterbacks, but still they seem to be, even though they're kind of thinking of an iffy starting quarterback plan, at least they're better prepared, it seems like, if that goes south than the Green Bay Packers are. Everybody seems better prepared than the Green Bay Packers if plan A does not work out. What do you think about Washington? Any other comments that we have?
Well, it looks like their usage of quarterbacks in the preseason game, they did use all 3. Howell played like the first quarter plus some. He was 9 of 12, 77 yards and a touchdown. Maybe the most interesting thing from that game was the end of first quarter score, 2-0.
Ooh, that's one of those scores that we would like to have in a safety, and that's at 2-0. I think that would a 4-3 game would be a nice one. Any baseball scores are always fun. Low baseball scores, not 7-6 or something like that in the first quarter. That's pretty pedestrian. But 4-3 or 2-2, that would be a good one.
That'd be great. 2-0 is pretty weird though.
2-0, yeah. Safeties are that's a real defensive struggle.
Right.
And what was the safety? Was it a sack in the end zone? What was it caused by?
I was actually trying to look at that. It looks as though it was a holding penalty in the end zone.
Automatic safety.
Backed up inside their own 5-yard line, and yes, took a technical safety, not an actual sack or a block punt or something like that. No, but
yes,
penalty in the end zone. Oh well. But yeah, it is like the weird, outlier sort of team where it's like a league minimum starting quarterback backed up by a top 10 paid quarterback is a bit strange.
That's the wacky NFC for you. The NFC is the division, is the conference where the quarterbacks are not as good, maybe not seen as important. Maybe they'll build the rest of the roster above the level of the AFC, since the AFC quarterbacks are taking so much money. It's hard to say. Maybe the non-quarterback position players will all go to the NFC. But yeah, it's a little strange, and it seems like the NFC is really anybody's for the taking if a really good quarterback can develop out of maybe one of those places where you don't expect it. So I'm looking forward to this upcoming season, and looking forward also to next week where we talk about the AFC quarterbacks in a few, possibly a few different installments. Just like it seems like this week is going to possibly be divided into multiple installments because we have so much information to be packed into. We can't even fit it into one supersized warning track power hour this time. It's just too much.
Supersized, and then another episode is what it's going to end up being, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll let the boys in the lab and Dr. Scaff worry about that. Do we should we consider signing out?
I think we should.
Yeah.
Not just consider it, but actually go ahead and sign out.
All right, let's go ahead and do it then. This has been another wonderful time with all of you viewers and listeners. And Dr. Scaff and I are especially grateful for your patronage, listenership, viewership. But we have to end this week's episodes of the Warning Track Power Hour, focusing on the National Football Conference. And we will be back next week with the AFC previews. We'll talk more about what happened in the preseason, maybe more about baseball and perhaps the Women's World Cup and other exciting, perhaps the new FIBA basketball upcoming World Cup as well, men's FIBA World Cup. We'll talk about maybe all of that stuff next week, but you'll have to hold tight for another 7 or so days. So until then, I remain Dr. Michael Werman. He remains Dr. Andrew Scaff. We remain the Warning Track Power Hour. Please like and or subscribe to our podcast or YouTube channel. And on that piece of boilerplate, we will say good day.